Hello and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christine Marie, and I am so incredibly thrilled to have Mark Grasse joining us today, former president of DigitalMarketer for 20 years and an incredible founder today of AI Branding Academy. He is the king of brand and, frankly, the king of AI as well, along with just so much experience on both sides, building businesses for other people and then also building businesses for himself. And today we're going to be talking about on the other side, the back side of burnout in this midlife moment, how our priorities shift and change when we've lived 20 plus years serving and giving to everybody else. What does it look like to actually reprioritize and refocus, hone in our energy on the latter side of the next 20 years of what am I building and who am I building this for? And Mark, I am so grateful for you joining us today because I know you've been through a lot of those questions right now. That's kind of at the forefront of your mind. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's neat to talk about because I think before when we initially had that conversation and it was about the transformation, I'm like, oh, I'm so much better now. I think after, going through a couple more years of it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it
Mhm.
doesn't actually stop. Like you don't
Mhm.
arrive. Like, and now I'm good. And so I think
Yes.
that's what I realized, the last like 6, 12 months was kind of like, no, this is just a thing you're just going to be evolving from now on. But now you're open to it. So it's not something that you fight against, which is nice.
Mark, I love actually this is so timely, of course, as it always is. Just this morning, I was thinking something very similar to that. And so to just give the listener some context, the transformation that you and I first connected on was I was on the Digital Marketer podcast, I guess 3 years ago. And at the conclusion of our conversation, we were off air and we just started talking about our individual transformations and our awakening moments of what we both liken to looking in the mirror and all of a sudden kind of becoming aware of this whole other reality, this whole other world, which is kind of the emotional intelligence. So many of us just operate in our left brain and never really give much privy or awareness to our right brain, which is where, 50% of us still exists, but for so many, we lock that down and it lies dormant. And so awakening that and thus living as a holistic human, that is a real transformation. And it truly is an awakening to this other part of your brain to allow for it to be an informant, to be a true intelligence. And then the intellectual and emotional intelligences, when activated, man, it's such a visceral experience with life. So that transformation that you're talking about, you said that you're finding in the last 6 to 12 months, it's a realization that it's not just a one-time event, it's ongoing. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's funny because you look at your life and you're like, okay, this is going well, this is going bad. Here's what I need to work on, and so on and so forth. I think the more you kind of open yourself up to like you don't actually know anything, then you start to see the other things where you're like, oh my gosh, this wasn't. I didn't think this was a problem, but now that I'm more authentic with myself or I'm more honest with myself, that's a huge problem. I'm gonna need to fix that too, or I'm gonna need to address it. And so it's almost like this ongoing awakening to like, oh, hey, that I thought that was okay, and it's not, and now I need to work on it. And whether that's your spirituality, your relationships, or even yourself, because it's kind of, I always, I'm an introvert, and so I always felt kind of guilty about enjoying solitude, where I was like, I don't need to be around anybody. I don't need friends necessarily, or not friends in the traditional concept, because my friends, and I do have friends now, which is nice.
Mhm.
I don't need to talk to them all the time. It's not, oh, we have this giant text string. It's literally like I might meet with them like once or twice a year, and that's good enough. And so it's almost just realizing that the relationships that I enjoy or that I have time and energy for are not what I thought I needed or thought I wanted. They're completely different than that. And so it's not simple. Initially, when I thought I woke up and I was like, oh, I'm so much better than I used to be, is you don't arrive, you don't even know what arrival looks like. And
Mhm.
so you feeling comfortable with it, like, oh no, I'm better now is, and then a few months pass, it'll be like, oh my gosh, I was terrible then. I'm better now. And so it's yeah, like I said, it's just an ongoing thing. And what I have realized now is that the more honest and open I am about that, instead of trying to qualify, okay, this feeling means I'm doing good by some
Wow.
average measure, doesn't matter. It's all just your individual experience and since you don't, you're having that individual experience, you can't arrive ever. And so that's kind of like the latest
I love
existential crisis.
well, and the pursuit of, honestly, a couple folks on the show have mentioned, which I really really like, the concept of a scoreboard. The more that we're
Mm,
chasing the numbers on a scoreboard, and the more we're labeling things good and bad, the more that we're actually really putting ourselves in a box. That is, once that box is removed, there's so much opportunity for evolution of ourselves. Actually, Qasim Aslam has in his 3X Freedom community, one of his elements of freedom, which I've never heard anybody say this before, but it's the freedom to evolve. I
mm,
love that. And it's not just ourselves, it's our businesses, it's our families, it's our values, relationships. And this concept of evolving allows for the continuous awakening rather than, oh, I was so bad then or whatever. It's like, no, actually, how exciting that every day there's something new to discover about ourselves and the world. And now it's actually living in the gain versus living in the gap.
mm. No, that's a great way to look at it, and I think that's actually a huge change in my perspective too. Is I've always been pretty cynical. Like I've been, I liked my future dystopia fiction and all that kind of stuff, and thinking of the end essentially. And I'm like, that was negative. I need to stop doing
Mhm.
that, and I need to, and it's so funny because we've all listened to all the self help, the Tony Robbins, and all those people growing up. And now I'm kind of like, gosh, they're actually right. I just
Mhm.
was too cynical to believe it because I was like, that's woo woo nonsense, and it's not logical. It's not based in reality and practicality. And now I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's right. It's just, I don't know. I
Wow.
wasn't ready to hear it or accept it. And
Mhm.
and maybe it's just that the fear and skepticism just colors all that as no, that's not what you need. or
Wow.
or just that, for me it's actually identifying that the reason why a lot of things are bad today, or what we consider as bad, is due to greed, where it's just like, hey, and I specifically most of the time I'm talking about companies where it's like, why is everything inflated? And it's not, it's inflated because of greed. And so I colored all of those messages as they're being greedy, they're manipulating emotions of people who are suffering from depression, anxiety, self-doubt, all the common things you see. uh, and they're just taking advantage of that, versus, hey, they're doing a good job and they're making money from it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, or that's just the reward for the good message they're spreading. And so,
Mm.
knowing that I've actually been coloring good things as greed, and therefore not listening to them, is another
Wow.
fun realization.
Mark, that is, honestly, there's so much humility in even you saying that. That's taking so much responsibility. And also, maybe there is greed there, that it's like it's almost hard to decipher between, the people who are actually being greedy versus those who aren't. And so in your ability to understand your responsibility of what's the lens through which I'm viewing the world.
Mm,
And there might still be an element of what you're observing is laced in greed, and that's true. And so what's your kind of, is there a sound bite? Is there some kind of guide that helps you determine, oh, that's the way that I'm seeing the world. That's a me opportunity
mm.
versus no, that's really what is. Like, how do you understand the difference between that? Or is there a practice that really allows for you to kind of get grounded enough to understand the difference of those?
You know what? I go back to Carl Jung's shadow work, where it's basically like I'm just trying to identify triggers. And so if I look at, say, a company that's doing something, and I'm like, okay, do I think they're genuine or not? I just look at how their content or message triggers me. Because if it's like, oh man, I hate that, like I hate what that is, and it's a visceral reaction, then
Yeah.
that's a trigger, and there's some reason why I'm reacting like that. So I meditate, I think about the situation, and I question it from a, why did I react like that? And so that was a trigger. What happened? And a lot of times, if you practice, you can actually go through all of your memories that are related to that feeling, and a lot of times you'll find the source, where it's like, oh, you know what, I hate that message, and it's because when I was 21 in real estate, I went to a conference and I heard somebody say that, and I didn't like their personality, I didn't like how they presented it, And now I just colored everything after that because of that one
So
experience.
good.
And a lot of times what you'll find is that it's not reasonable, and you aren't making a logical decision to think like that or react like that. You're just following some programming that you set in place a million years ago. And it might be a lot of times it goes back to childhood. It could go back to, oh, I was 5 years old and the kid pushed me on the playground and now I hate everybody with blonde hair. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's dumb. you know. So you have to re-examine and say, okay, now I'm an adult. I'm more logical. I can look at it from an outside perspective and be like, that's not reasonable. And it's a waste of time and energy, and it's preventing me from, progressing as a person. So I'm going to stop doing that, and I'm going to, forgive the child, forgive your inner child. And now I can move forward from a logical perspective.
Yes, and here's the question. So moving forward from a perspective, um, it's almost, is the logical perspective the desired approach, or
Mhm.
is it the ability to understand what both have to say? Because sometimes there is a going with your gut, but like, frankly, I've always been more of the aversion towards the logic. That's how I was raised, and frankly, I found so much weakness in emotion for so many years, and it's been, and with only with intention to cultivate the awareness of
Mhm.
emotional data. So how do you kind of, is it okay understanding how emotions impact and then proceeding with logic, or is it holding both in duality? What does that look like for you moving forward?
Yeah, it's kind of both, because I think I'm the same with you, where it's like, oh, they're just angry, like, and
Yeah.
you kind of say, oh, that colors all their perspective, so I don't really trust it. Now it has to be an integration of the two, because you realize that how you feel and how others feel is real. Like, that's the effect,
Yes.
whether it makes sense or not. That really doesn't matter, because that's the impact. So you have to kind of do both, and I
Yeah.
am I am trying to now, not say, hey, you're being unreasonable, so everything you say is not valid, and
So
instead say, hey, the emotion itself is actually an indicator of how they really feel about this, and everything else is like supporting evidence of that. But you have to consider everything. And so for me personally, like, I used to disregard my own emotions, like you said, and just say, hey, I'm just being unreasonable. This feeling is not right. And so I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist. Whereas now, all that leads to is probably illness, is you not addressing things. And so I am trying to be more like, how do I feel about this? And my feeling about it is valid and
mm,
should be examined, instead of saying that's wrong and throwing it
yes.
out the window. And that's actually, that one practice has probably led me down the wrong path so many times. Whereas if I just said, like, how I feel about this matters, and so I should address that too. And I did this with a lot of jobs or businesses and things I didn't like, but I kept on doing because I should like
Mhm.
it. I should be okay with this. And now I'm like, no, how I feel is just as valid as anything else.
Yes. I like that you said both are real. Logic and emotion are both real. And for so long as we're putting greater weight on one or the other. And that's the other thing. People can go too far on the side of emotion and put greater weight there. And that's dangerous, true, too, because the logic and the emotion both constitute the reality of what is.
Mhm.
It's not just one or the other. And you said illness. So the suppression of emotion can manifest in illness. That's what, did I
Oh
hear you
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
Can
I
you?
mean, well, I mean, people, they might have aches or pains, or they're constantly getting sick or things like that, and they don't realize that it's actually their emotion that's carrying it. Your body doesn't know the difference between,
Yeah.
what you think and what's actually happening. So if you just tell yourself, like, oh, I'm ill, I'm tired, I can't do this, and it's like all the self-talk, and that's the kind of stuff I used to discount, where it was just like
Mm,
self-talk, like, man up. You
yeah.
just got to get the job done. Like, shut up about how you feel about it. And now I'm like the exact opposite, where I'm like, no, how you feel about this matters. And it's actually translated to business too, because I used
Mm,
to think, how I went to school was always about, hey, if you're managing people, you need to address their feelings, address their objectives and things they want to accomplish, and you need to accommodate that. And if you're not accommodating it, that's a you problem. And
Mm.
now I actually flipped where I'm like, hey, if you have somebody in your business that isn't aligned with your specific vision for the business, they shouldn't be there. And there's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to find a place for them. They need to go find some place where they do feel,
Yes.
successful and they are accomplishing their dreams, but that's not your job to accommodate it. You need to train them, you need to provide them with everything they need, but it's fine. You don't have to employ everybody. If it's a bad fit, it's a bad fit. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's go ahead and move on with our lives. And so it actually
Good.
helped in both ways, personal and business
Right.
wise.
Well, in the business wise too, I'm glad you brought that up. One of our clients, we were working together on his keynote, and he's a therapist, but also an executive coach. So he brings a very cool dynamic in performance coaching, bolstered by decades of therapeutic practice in the
Mm,
greater DC area. So he's worked with so many high performers, and it is wild the amount of statistics that show when there's dissonance between the employee's emotional buy-in to the vision or values of the company, it highly and directly shows up in their work and their
mhm,
ability to perform well. And so really, if there's an emotional dissonance or emotional buy-in, you can see
mm,
it very clearly in both how they show up in terms of impacting culture, but then also the output of their work. And
mm.
so both are so, so, so critical. I love this conversation. Mark, you spent, you were talking right before we got on about how, the first 20 years of your life, you were really focused on one thing. And now it's like just continuously realizing all these other elements of life that really do matter. And so, obviously, one of those, based on what we've already talked about, is the duality of honoring both the emotion and the logic. What else have been some really core elements that have changed in addition to that? But then also, you mentioned, awakening is an ongoing process and it
Mm.
impacts every area of your life. So, what are you learning about right now specifically that's just really a big difference from the last 20 years that you want to take into the next 20?
You know what? It's really presence, where it's kind of like I've always been kind of a futurist. I love, hard science fiction. I've read like 1,000 books in space operas and different kind of
I love that.
semi-technical focus on the future. And the way I always looked at it was that the science fiction basically takes an initial principle or event and then expands it to see the potential of it. And so really, it's trying to predict the future all the time. So I've lived my whole life with predicting the future and then structuring my actions so I get to that future that I predicted. And now I look at it, I'm like, that's silly. Like I'm way too limited to actually be able to do that. I could speculate, but focusing too much on that, on where things are going and ignoring like how things currently are actually leads you to produce products that aren't, products or services that aren't necessarily good and will succeed because that might not happen. The future you predicted might not happen. So what I'm trying
Wow.
to do now is just say, hey, what's happening right now? What's the impact I can make right now, given my resources available, and focusing less on here's what's going to happen. And it's a lot really mainly due to AI, where it's kind of like, I don't know what's going to happen. The technology keeps on shifting. It's acting unpredictable in terms of it's not like this linear, hey, it's getting better and better and better. It's like, oh, it got better. Oh, it's junk again. Oh, it got better again. Oh, no, it's junk again. And it's
Mm.
not performing the way people thought it would. And so that kind of led me to this, plus my personal experience where it's like predicting the future hasn't gone great. Well, it has in some regards, because if I look at like my career history, where it's like, okay, I've built and sold companies, I've been an executive for multiple positions and industries,
Yes.
and so I've done things, but it hasn't led to like, okay, I've accomplished something that I think is valuable for the world and something I feel good about. Again, going back to that, emotions matter. So yeah,
Mm.
now I'm just trying to, okay, who can I help right now in a way that's makes sense and makes money. It's, I
Yes.
talk about the greed stuff, but really the greed focus has also been a limitation, where it's
Yeah.
kind of like I wanted to be so not like the people that I think are bad, the greedy, unscrupulous, immoral business owners that make decisions just all based on greed, then that's not helpful either. So I'm just trying to say, okay, right now based on what I have and the time and resources I have available, how can I just move the ball forward? Just keep going forward, and I'll be
Yeah.
better off.
This is so good. I want to just kind of double click on one of the things you said. You mentioned the folks earlier who, are those who, honestly, there's been a lot of coloring of their actions with greed, but also they have acted in perhaps with malice intent
Hmm.
for some of the folks you've encountered. I think that that's so incredibly important for us to consider. Who are the people that am I have almost like this abhorrence to, because my strong reaction to them reveals a lot about me. They're a mirror. And my abhorrence to them is likely limiting me from being able to get to where I need to. For example, there's a couple that have a mastermind and a very large community that continuously are dishonest, and it really makes me upset. And I'm like, they've got so much, like, everybody's falling for it. And again, you hear there's like this whole community of people who are trying to sue them, and like, it's so bad. But that really makes me upset because I'm like, it's so non-integrous. And so I have intentionally been like, well, I don't want to be like that, and so let me go hide. That's not the right answer.
Hmm.
And so really, you mentioned fear earlier. You said fear and skepticism. There's fear in becoming like the people that we have that strong aversion to, and that fear can deter us from the very pathway that we need, which might actually take us through. That person might be literally on the road to where we're headed. But if we're afraid of them and we diverge and try to go a different direction, we're getting off course rather than effectively facing what they have to reflect in us, the mirror that's in our way, rather than being brave enough to move through it. So can you talk a little bit about that aspect of, like, in order to, it's actually more scary in some ways to move in the direction towards what could be our greatest fear than to almost like sit stagnant and predict or talk about where we need to go and vision and all of that, rather than doing the work of moving slowly in the direction where our greatest fear may lie.
Yeah, well, what you talked about is the exact trigger situation where it's like, oh, I
Yeah.
see that person, I don't want to be like them, and then you're focusing on negative, right? You're focusing on
Mhm.
not, and so I don't want to be like that. But the fact of the matter is, you don't actually know anything. You have this perception of, oh, this person, and I don't think they're genuine, and I don't think they have the right motivation, and blah blah blah. What you could focus on is like, hey, you know what? They are accomplishing something. They are helping people. Their motivation and their objectives, while they might not, what you think is bad, they might not be bad, and they are accomplishing good. And so you're eliminating all this whole path just because you think what they do is bad or they are bad.
Yeah.
But what you realize is just that, like, the thing that you hate in everybody else or the people you don't like is the thing you hate about yourself. And so you got to
Yes.
look at that trigger, you got to reflect and realize, like, why do I feel this way? It was, I cheated, and so I'm coloring everything they do as bad because I was cheated by somebody in the past, and that's
Mm.
not right. I need to look at it objectively. Plus, you need to just chill out. Stop doing so much research. Stop focusing so much on them. You have a job to do, and
Yes.
once you get that purpose and objective down, then, and this is where why I focus so much on frameworks, because I'm like, if you just had a template to get started, you set the
Yeah.
plan in place, and maybe it's not going forever. It's not 12 months, but at least 3 months. And this goes back to the marketing stuff, and then you execute. And the businesses that I've done that have worked are the ones where I just said, okay, I have the goal in mind, but I have these tasks right now. Here's my present
Mm.
list of tasks, and I just got to get these tasks done, and I'll figure out where I am on the path later on, but I need to do this stuff right now. And that's why, I focus a lot on content creation. And I'm like, if you're focusing on, hey, I need to go viral, so I'm going to look at all the viral people and just
Yeah.
reproduce their content. One, that's off brand because that's their brand, and you got to stay on your brand unless your whole brand is built off of, like, I just do the viral trend,
Yeah.
which is an extremely temporary situation. You just got to set the plan in place, almost ignore the metrics, which I know is like blasphemy for marketers, but it's like, focus on the work, focus on right now, just do the stuff, ignore the results for now, and you'll probably be better off. Because any plan you have, I actually had this conversation this morning about how the number one They did a survey at my son's school. The number one path that everybody wants is YouTube content creator. Like that's the
I
number one profession kids want to be. Well, and I tell these kids, I told my son, because my son's, oh yeah, YouTube content creator. I'm like, you guys have no idea how much work that is. It looks fun and it looks like they're having a great time, but these people that have succeeded have been doing this stuff for a decade or more most of the time. Yes, you have the viral sensations that are like 18 years old, but most of the time it's somebody who has had 50 different channels or has just been grinding for a
yeah,
decade. It's not easy, it's not fun, and honestly, the work never ends. And that's something that now that I have kind of a better idea of what I want and who I am, now I'm like, man, that's too much work. I don't want to work,
yeah.
50 hours a week on this forever. Because
Mm,
as soon as you stop, that's the thing that people don't realize about content. As soon as you stop, the results stop. And it's built like that on purpose
yeah,
because they're looking for you to create more content. So they're not going to give you traffic if you don't. And there you
yeah.
go.
That's so good. We talked a little bit about this in the green room before we went on air, which I really loved. Just this morning, I was flying into DC, and I was thinking like, how I've got all this content from my wonderful trip over the last week and a half, and because I knew that I was like, I want to post this stuff like in sequential order, and I have an announcement that I need to make for next week, and I haven't made the announcement because I like wanted to post this other stuff, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like if I was to like, this is so overwhelming. I now probably have like 3,000 pictures from last week and videos and
Mm.
all the reels to make and all of that. But if I was to just take one picture and post it in real time, whether it's on a story or whatnot, that way I can still maintain presence rather than creating the reel later and then the caption later, or taking time to actually plan everything out and then putting it into ChatGPT. There's so much content that I've created that frankly has never seen the light of day because I don't have the picture associated with it, or I haven't put it into GPT for editing and things like that. It's like, oh my word, this is so much. And to your point, now that you know who you are and what you want, now you're making decisions of what to eliminate accordingly. The
Mm.
first part of awakening for me, Mark, and I'm curious your perspective on this. The first part of awakening for me was, what do I need to remove about me and eliminate about me in order to kind of come back to, I liken it to Michelangelo when he was asked, how did he create David? He said, I chipped away everything he was not. And that's how
Mm.
I found David. And so in the first part of this awakening process is like, okay, I need to remove and shed everything that's excess, that's not me, to return to kind of the core authentic person that I was created to be in the first place. And now I'm finding I need to shed excess practices and distractions of my life. And I think one of those, honestly, is going to be something around content. So it's much more like instantaneous rather than mapping out the calendar. I have the best intention of doing that. And I want to live so present. You said present versus future,
Mm.
and creating content for the future isn't being in the present. And there's a time and season for that. But what are your thoughts on that specifically as it pertains to present and future? How do you maintain some semblance of content creation and brand presence?
Mm. Well, I do think it's a mix. You do have to do some planning. I call it like your kind of baseline content, just like you would. I was in the fitness industry for 10 years, and I was like, the only way you're getting results is if you always do it. It's not 30 days to big biceps or something. That was always the content articles I was fighting against because I was like, that doesn't matter. Like you're not going to get big biceps in 1 month. It just doesn't work like that. You
It's
have
true.
to set a plan. Well, the problem is that the content a lot of creators create is deceptive, where it's like, yes, well, he's a professional, he has big arms, so why can't I get big biceps in 30 days? And you're like, yeah, he's been doing this for 25 years. Like
Yes.
this did not happen overnight. And so for a lot of people, you're trying to combat against that, where they're saying, oh, well, you can get this done in this amount of time. They're lying. And instead, what you have to focus on is the baseline and then the little bit extra when you have a chance. So what I would say to, the content question is set up the calendar, and it could be easy brand awareness type content. And that's your average. And then whenever you have a spark of innovation, make a new piece of content. And then, yeah, you're interrupting the structure a little bit, but overall, it's going to be it could get a lot better engagement because that's what people are looking for today. And with now you're competing against AI videos where it's like you can't even tell if a person's a person. And most people don't see that because they don't really understand like how the technology has evolved. But I could shoot a video of myself and then go into Hey Jen, and I could switch out me and my voice, and I could just be a different person talking to you. Now,
Mm.
from a person who hates making content, that's amazing. I don't have to be in front of a camera, or I could produce content for a client without having to try to get them in front of a camera, which I'm sure
Right.
you know how difficult that is. Where it's like, oh, I need
Yes.
you to just shoot a little video. Oh,
So
no,
quick.
it's so good. It's so easy. Just chat to the phone. No, that's like saying, hey, go pole vault. Here's a
Yeah.
pole,
You're
go
like,
pole vault. And you're like, I don't know how to do that. Plus, I'm terrified of doing that.
yeah,
Public speaking is still the number one fear. And they're never going to do that. So, anyways, so there are situations where it makes sense for somebody to maybe do that, but you could still type something,
yeah,
and you could even, record yourself saying something, convert, take the transcript, put it into AI and say, make me sound smart. You can still do it. It's sort of genuine content. But yeah, I think it's a mix. I think it's have a schedule, have your key metrics and all that kind of stuff. But whenever you have that spark, turn on the camera and do it. And eventually, what you're trying to find is what works plus what's sustainable. And
yeah,
and that's the trick, because you could say, hey, I know that the number one content being generated is videos, so I should make videos. But you hate making videos. It's like, okay, well, sorry, that's probably not your content path. Find something that you enjoy. Oh, I love making graphics, or I love, talking to people, and I'm great at conversation, but I'm bad at presenting. Okay, you need to make a podcast. That's
right,
fine. Hey, I'm,
right.
I'm terrible at all of that. Okay, well, write articles, and
Yeah,
so, and that's what I try to convince people to do, is this constant content generation, and then a systematic experimentation, where we call it the content evolution strategy, where basically you are producing content series, you are just releasing the series, and then you have lots of content online that gets SEO and AI SEO traffic, and you win, but
yeah,
no matter what, it just has to, something has to happen all the
right.
time. That's what digital marketing is about, is constant. So if you don't like that, then this might not be the business for you. that's
Yeah.
that's the answer.
Well, I just love the emphasis on what do you like? Where do you feel comfortable? Because it's so true. I even saw this video by a content creator who I actually really respect the way that they approach their content. And she just had this beautiful reminder of, the goal is to be consistent. Um, you don't have to you really don't actually need to be posting every day. And even just hearing that was a good reminder for me. It's like, oh yeah, I don't need to be doing
Mhm.
that every day. Because in trying to every day, if you miss a day, ugh, well, now I screwed it all up. And then you've got to your point of not focusing on the negative, but focusing on the positive. Where do you feel comfortable? Where do you shine? Where do you actually allow yourself to be lit up? And it could be, I actually know that I actually do really well in the early morning. So
Mm.
then, okay, create content then rather than focusing on the modality. Maybe it's actually the time of day. When do you actually really shine? Um, so I really appreciate that perspective, because I think that I have to fit the mold of what everyone else is
Mm.
doing is so dangerous. And ultimately, it's not being authentic to who we are, where we shine, where we actually feel compelled to show up, and how. So thank you for that, because I think I found every single person is a content creator. And the lie is that I'm not creative. And
Mm.
actually, I think that could very well be one of the biggest lies, is that we are now consumers rather than creators. And to be a creator and return to that is actually to return to us being like the one who created us, which is God himself, the divine. So there's actually a spark of divinity in each one of us when we actually do create. And it should elicit a joy in that creation rather than it being a drudgery. Because if we're fixated on everyone else and how they're creating, it's never going to be life-giving. So true
Ah,
creation actually feeds us.
it is, and it's well, and what you also realize, that some of those barriers that you had, because I always had a barrier with social, because I don't like attention. Like I just don't
Mm,
like it. It's not something I go for. It doesn't empower me. It doesn't make me feel
yeah,
better. And for the longest time, I was like, it should make me feel good to have this attention and authority and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, it just doesn't. I actually really dislike it. I like being anonymous. I like when people think my ideas are good or useful or it helps people, but I don't need credit and attention for it,
Right.
which is a big contradiction and frankly
Yeah.
not helpful. I wish it did something. I wish, oh yay, I feel great because attention, and it just doesn't. So but now I accept that about myself, and that's why structure works for me personally, because if I don't set a
Mhm.
structure, I'm going to do this article, I'm going to do this video, I'm going to come out with this podcast on a regular basis, I just won't do it because
Yeah.
why?
So
You could say, oh
good.
well, money, and then it's like, but then I and I'm still battling the inherent guilt I feel about that, where I'm just like, oh god, I hate how, personally I think that money really has destroyed the world. It's not that
Mhm.
money itself is evil, but the pursuit of it most of the time leads you there, right? Like, hey,
Right.
if I twist the truth a little bit on this ad campaign and say you could get big biceps in 30 days, like I know it's not true, and most people know it, but you're still being deceptive. And so, for me, it was always I don't want to be that, and I don't want to have
Yeah.
my legacy, whatever that means, be that I made all my money off of this
On the back
ickiness.
of honesty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on the back. And you're seeing that today. I mean, you had the whole Ty Lopez thing where it's like, oh, it was a pyramid scheme the whole time, or whatever the claims are. Don't quote me on that. But I'm like, everybody knows what he in the industry, everybody knows what he was doing, and everybody sees the marketing and how it works, but your average person doesn't know anything about that. And so
Yes.
I always wanted to not be that. And because I personally know what it is and whether they understand it or not, or if I could claim, well, they get the benefit, right? So it's okay that the ends justify the means. I was always like, no, that's
Yes.
not, I don't agree with
I
that.
I really respect that, Mark, and I actually think that in and of itself, I mean, thank God for one, people like you, and two, that's part of your brand, and so the more that we actually can talk about those aspects of even like the inner dialogue and the inner struggle, I find that so many people resonate with it because otherwise they don't know. And there is something like I have a hard time knowing that, okay, for my book, I could pay to get on the number one Wall Street or New York Times bestseller. And it's like, I know that if
It's
I got
so
that,
tempting, right?
it's so tempting because I know that it would reach more people. And I really believe that this book could really change so many lives. And it's not honest. They would buy it under a false pretense, but technically it's not false because I am, but I pay for it. That whole
Yeah.
element, like, oh my gosh. And so then it's like, okay, what's the why? Why am I writing this book? Why am I and so then it's like, okay, if we can trust ourselves, if I can trust Christine Marie in my heart for other people, can I then go do this with a good conscience because I actually know that the end result is going to yield the impact that I want it to, and I don't know yet. I don't know what
Yeah,
that.
it's tough, and I kind of question because originally when I founded AI Branding Academy, like the business ethics and morals behind all your marketing was
Mm,
really on the top of my mind, and I debated on leading with that because I was like, you know what, I should document and categorize all the unethical marketing practices, planned obsolescence,
yeah,
deceptive marketing, deceptive ads, like all these different claims, or even manipulation where it's just like, hey, I'm going to use your fear of the apocalypse to sell you MREs. And like, oh, things are getting bad. You really need to do this. And even if that is legitimate, where it's like, well, yeah, things are getting bad, and you should have this. Like, as a business, should I take advantage of that fear that you have?
yeah,
And is that right or wrong? And so, and now I don't really have an answer because I'm like, it is real and it is to some people. And if that is the messaging that's going to speak to the right target market, then maybe it's okay because they are having this fear. And I think for me, when I talk about marketing, it's saying, the true definition of it is I am the in between a valuable product and the exact part people, the customer avatar that it should be sold to. And if you could bridge that gap and help them do it, ideally through education, which is why I concentrate on content, that's
right.
the ideal scenario. However, if you don't advertise and you think you're going to make any money in the first 3, 6, 12 months of your business, it's going to
Yes.
be a rough go because it's going to take a long time. And I tell people that about content. I'm like, plan on doing a year
Yeah.
of content, and then you might get some success out of it. And it might take you way longer. And nobody likes to hear that. And that's why you have marketers again that try, oh yeah, I'll get you those results in 3 months, or I'll get you that result in 30 days. Just give me a chance. And it's led to this situation where you have everybody is either being deceived or, well, frankly, the businesses just go out of business. I think the business failure
Yeah.
rate is probably 95% instead of the, or they say 50% of businesses in 3 years. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's not
Way
considering all the ones. Oh, way
higher.
higher. I mean, I've worked with, when I had my agency, my website design and branding business, I helped 300 different customers kind of start their brands. And the percentage, because I'll go through my portfolio and say, hey, which ones are still online or which ones still
Wow.
exist, is it's like 10 to 20% maybe,
Yeah.
and it's depressing. And so we all just kind of ignore them and say, oh no, you can do it. Here's the trick, So it's, but my
Number
message is not, well, number one book on Amazon or on,
Yeah.
Times or whatever. Even like the Forbes, like a lot of people don't know that you could just buy your way into Forbes magazine, and then now
Yeah.
you're a published Forbes author. And it's like, yeah, because they're paying for it. And that's
Yeah.
that's another thing that people don't realize about marketing is it's all made up, all the awards. And this is why I haven't really been going to a lot of the expos, because I'm just like, I can't divorce the marketing component that I know exists out of the event, where it's like, oh, let me, you have ClickFunnels where, oh, I got my 7-figure award or whatever it is, which is also a really cool accomplishment, but it's misleading, and it's really just beneficial for the organization giving you the award, because now I gave you the award. I'm the authority. I'm the
Yeah.
one that defines what success is. And now here you go, peasant. Here's your award. And it's
Oh,
kind of, and I'm
love
like, but also it is good. It's good to get the recognition. It's good to celebrate accomplishments. And so that's
Yeah.
probably the ongoing struggle I'm having, where it's like, okay, I don't want to be that, and I do want to encourage good business practices and ethics and
Right.
growth. And how do you do that while still, making money, which is
Yes.
the tough part.
What's interesting, Mark, as you're talking, I almost just wonder if they're even, and this is just brainstorming, so we could take this offline. But I just had a thought. Oh no, somebody's here to test our water. We'll have to talk about my idea for later.
There you go.
Mark, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so grateful for you. I'm going to send you a voice message after this with my idea for
Awesome.
you, because the way that you're talking, I'm like, there could be a business here. But
Yes,
thank you
it's a
so
hard
much.
business.
I know. Well, thank you so much, Mark. So grateful. And frankly, I'd love to maybe even jump back on here at another time, because there was just so many things you talked about that I know we could pull threads on. So I appreciate you, my friend. It was so
Sure.
good to see you.
Anytime. I'm back online for now.
Good.